My older sister and I share a rental home in our neighborhood, splitting the bills. Last October, as the weather began cooling down, she planned a week-long trip to Florida to meet friends. Although she invited me, I couldn't get time off work. She left on Monday morning, a day I didn't have to work. I tidied the house and enjoyed having the place to myself that day. However, around 2 p.m. there was a knock at the door. Assuming it might be a package my sister had ordered, I answered it. An older man, perhaps in his early 40s, stood there, not holding any package. "Hi, how can I help you?" he asked. He held my gaze for an unsettlingly long moment before responding, "Oh, I just wanted to see who lived here. Sorry, didn't mean to bother you." He offered a smile, nodded, and walked away. I found that strange and wasn't sure what he meant, but I closed the door and carried on with my day. As far as I know, nothing else happened that evening. The next day, I had work, so I got up early and went to the office. I returned home around 6 p.m., only half an hour later, and while cooking dinner, there was another knock. This time, I checked the peephole before answering, and it was the same man from the day before. He was easy to recognize because he wore the exact same clothes. I opened the door, though I was more hesitant this time, just cracking it open. "Is everything okay?" I asked. "Oh, of course," he smiled, as if my question was silly. He then claimed he was just checking in on me, as if it were expected. "Oh, are you my neighbor?" I asked, figuring he must be one of those older, nosy neighbors. It was still odd for him to check on me, but it would make sense. "Oh no, I'm just walking around," he said. At this point, he was really starting to creep me out. I said I was fine and shut the door. I waited until he left my porch, then went back to cooking. That night, I texted my sister to ask if she'd ever seen that man before, but she said no. I felt paranoid for the rest of the night. Even though I felt safe inside with all doors locked, I also felt like I was being stalked and watched. What could that man possibly want? That wasn't normal or creepy. The night passed without any further signs of him, and the following day, he didn't knock. I hoped maybe it was nothing to worry about after all. The day after that, I had the day off work, and it was the last day my sister would be gone. I mostly stayed inside, reading and watching YouTube. I kept peeking out the windows just in case, but saw nothing unusual. Around 8 p.m., I was watching TV when I heard something scrape against the outside of the house, like a stick scratching the siding. I quickly got up, opened the blinds, and saw the bush right under the window shaking. Faintly, I could hear footsteps running away. I couldn't see anything else in the dark, though. I felt sick to my stomach. It had to be the same man. How long had he been there? Was he sitting in the bushes trying to watch me through the window? I was so panicked I didn't know what to do and ended up calling my sister. Luckily, she answered. I tried to explain what was happening, but I think I was talking too fast for her to understand. Midway through the conversation, there was a knock at the door. I didn't answer, but the man started calling out and knocking louder. He asked me to let him in and tried to guilt trip me, saying he was injured. Then he made excuses about being outside my home and started apologizing for everything. He continued banging on the door. It was creepy and disturbing how desperate he was for me to open the door. Clearly, something was wrong with him. My sister told me to call 911 immediately, so I hung up and did as she said. The man stayed at the door for a whole 5 minutes, still trying to convince me, before finally leaving. What the man actually wanted is unknown, and how long he was stalking me is also unknown. He could have somehow figured out my sister was gone for the week. It just seems like too big of a coincidence. Whatever the case, I haven't seen him at all since then. Hopefully it stays that way. Story 2 by Ryan E. It was just 2:42 a.m., and I had gotten an Uber back to my place after partying all night for New Year's. I don't think I was completely plastered, but I was definitely well beyond tipsy and had a terrible headache. When I was dropped off, I slowly made my way up to the front door and fumbled with my keys for what felt like forever before finally getting inside. I threw everything on the floor, took an ibuprofen, and collapsed onto the couch. I was exhausted and tired, but the headache kept me from sleeping, so I just lay there with my eyes closed for a while. Honestly, I have no idea how long I lay there. Randomly, though, the doorbell rang. It rang several times, but I didn't get up to answer it or even look through the peephole. At that moment, I didn't care or even think about it. I just wanted to lie there and try to sleep and not be bothered. Obviously, someone ringing my doorbell repeatedly in the middle of the night should have been concerning, but like I said, I'd had a bit too much to drink. Surprisingly, not too long after they stopped ringing the doorbell, I actually managed to fall asleep on the couch. I couldn't say how long I was asleep, but when I woke up, I felt very groggy and weak, still with a pounding headache. The whole house was dark. I stood up and tried to make my way to the kitchen for a glass of water when I noticed a streak of light on the wall in the hallway. Even in my not-so-sober state, it was unmistakable. The light was coming from the front door being partially open, and moonlight was spilling into the house. Had I really been so drunk that I didn't close the door? There was no way. Before I could even walk into the hallway and look at the door, footsteps moved around upstairs. I froze, then hurried back to the couch and ducked behind it. There were 2 sets of footsteps walking right above me. I thought about making a run for it, but my hesitation ruined my chances. As the footsteps began making their way down the stairs, there was a pause. Then the sound of the front door shutting, and the streak of light disappeared. "All right, let's get on with it," a man spoke. I was completely sobered up now and realized they had probably just gotten inside moments before I woke up. I immediately checked the bedrooms upstairs, but didn't see anyone, meaning they likely thought the place was empty. My chest felt like it was burning from how fast my heart was racing. The men moved around in the room on the other side of the house and began chatting, like everyday regular talk about life. I don't know, but something about it was so disturbing and terrifying. I mean, if they were so comfortable breaking into my home and having casual conversations while doing so, then what the hell were they going to do if they found me? I could hear them taking things, robbing all the rooms in the house. Finally, the footsteps made their way into the living room. The way the couch was diagonal in the corner, I was somewhat hidden behind it, but the couch was also short, so if they got close to it, they would easily be able to see me. I just listened as they walked around, moving things and opening every drawer and box they saw. Then, one of the men started walking closer to the couch. I hoped and waited for their footsteps to stop or change direction, but they kept coming closer and closer until I saw their head show above me. They were looking down at the cushions, though, and I guessed they didn't see me in their peripheral vision. Then, they moved on to the next room. I sat there motionless for almost 30 minutes, listening to them rummage through the entire house before they finally left. I didn't hear them say anything about coming back, but I grabbed my phone and ducked back behind the couch as I called the cops. The situation is mostly exactly what it seemed like. The men came in and robbed the valuables from my home. I'd forgot to lock the front door, but there's some evidence that it wouldn't have mattered. A neighbor said they saw 2 men watching my house rather suspiciously over the course of the past week. Likely, they saw that I lived alone and always parked in the driveway, so when I took my car to the New Year's party and came back in an Uber without my car, they thought I wasn't home. Thankfully, it seems they only intended to rob me and nothing more, but had they found me, who knows what could have happened. Story 3 by Lily P. I was at home with my dog, Hazel. It was a normal night. I had already gotten out of work and was just trying to enjoy the few hours I had before bed. I was watching TV and eating some snacks when Hazel got up and went to the back door, wanting to be let out. I got up and let her outside to do her business. I had a pretty small, fenced-in backyard, so I never really needed to keep an eye on her too much. Usually, she'd stay out for a while and sniff around. Anyway, while I was up, I put some dishes away and cleaned up the mess I made from cooking earlier. Then, Hazel started barking. She liked to bark at squirrels and stuff, but after a few seconds, she still hadn't let up. I walked over to the back door and opened it, seeing Hazel standing by the side of the fence and barking at it, like something was on the other side. It was just woods on that side of the fence, so I thought maybe she'd seen a coyote or something. Just to be safe, I called her back inside. I got back on the couch and turned the TV on. Something was immediately different about Hazel, though. Usually she'd lay on or next to me, but she was sitting on the edge of the couch, head perked up, staring at the back door. No matter how much I called her over, she'd just glance at me, then go back to watching. She was like this for the rest of the night. A couple of times, I did look over there, but saw nothing. I thought she was just in protective mode for some reason, which she does randomly sometimes. We stayed up for a bit, then went to bed at 10:30. Hazel usually sleeps on the end of my bed or on her doggy bed in the corner of the room, but I always leave the bedroom door cracked open because her food and water are downstairs. When I woke up in the middle of the night, I noticed the bedroom door was wide open, much more than I had left it. Maybe she had bumped into the door. She wasn't in the room, and I didn't hear her nails clicking on the wooden floor or the sound of her eating or drinking. On any other day, I probably would have just gone back to sleep and not worried about it, but something gave me a bad gut feeling. Even my body seemed to have fully woken up already. I got out of bed and looked out into the hallway. The house was quiet. "Hazel," I called. I walked down the steps and into the living room. Everything seemed to be normal, but all the food and water in her bowls were still full. At this point, everything was rushing through my mind. I was scared. Maybe somehow I'd left the back door open and she ran away or something, even though I knew I hadn't. I walked into the kitchen and my heart sank, seeing Hazel crouched underneath the table, shivering and shaking and staring at me, completely terrified of something. I called her name again, and she didn't move. Then I noticed the back door was open. Everything was starting to come together in my mind, but I didn't know what to do. I felt trapped and scared and vulnerable. I hurried over to the table, picked Hazel up, and ran right out the back door. I left through the fence gate and ran over to a neighbor's house. It took a minute, but eventually they woke up and answered the door. I called the police for me. When officers searched my home, they didn't find anyone. There were a few signs of shoe prints around the house, though, some even being upstairs. That whole scenario is so confusing and left me with hundreds of questions and zero answers. I don't know who it was, or why they broke in, or even how long they'd been inside. Were they the ones to open my bedroom door all the way? Were they hiding when I was looking for Hazel? Were they even still in the house? I almost wish I had encountered them before running away, so I'd at least have some sort of answers now. Instead, I'm left with nothing. I just have to live and hope it was some random thing and that they don't come back.